Thank you. That was lovely. So now we have a session with Michael Nash, who's going to talk about the power of art, inspiring action, igniting change. And he will be joined by Andrea Garcia, our own host of the Climate Corrections podcast in Spanish. Let me tell you a little bit about Michael. He's an award-winning filmmaker and artist, dedicating his career to using storytelling as a catalyst for global awareness. His groundbreaking film, Climate Refugees, woke up millions of people to the reality of what's happening. And he had the pleasure of getting that sent to the lunar surface alongside works of Beethoven and Picasso. So forever we will know about Climate Refugees as Michael's film. He's the founder of the Beverly Hills production. He's named one of the top 10 filmmakers for the planet by Movie Maker magazine. He's a respected voice on the intersection of art and social impact. He's a producer in the production of Chasing Truth, a film executively produced by Leonardo DiCaprio and Volo Foundation. And in The Power of Art, Inspiring Action, Igniting Change, he explores how storytelling can fuel movements. Please welcome to the stage Michael Nash and Andrea Garcia.
Michael, thank you for joining us today. I heard you have something to show us.
I do. First of all, I'd like to thank the Volos, Tahis, and David for allowing me to be here. It's just truly been amazing listening to everybody over the last couple of days, all this art and dance and meditation and facts and figures and stats and scientific data. It's exciting to see like the energy within this room. And so what I'm going to show you a 3.5-minute film that basically illuminates this film that I did 15 years ago called Climate Refugees. And we'll also talk about how this film 15 years ago is still kind of traveling around the world with an art collection driving impact. And once that shows, I'm happy to answer any questions or just happy to be here.
You forgot to mention something. Not only around the world, but outside the world as well.
Yes, it was an off-Earth experience. Truly an off-Earth experience, which this video will highlight.
Let's play it.
Over a decade ago, filmmaker Michael Nash embarked on a journey across 48 countries to uncover the human face of climate change. His work culminated in the award-winning and prophetic film titled Climate Refugees, which world premiered at the 2010 Sundance Film Festival. Today, Earth's climate is shifting at a pace beyond what we once believed possible. Heat waves, rising seas, and relentless storms are reshaping our world, forcing millions to leave their homes. This is not a distant threat. It is happening now. By 2050, the United Nations estimates that up to 250 million people could be displaced by climate-related disasters. Some experts predict even higher figures, up to 1.2 billion people. This unprecedented migration means entire populations will be on the move, seeking safety and a chance to survive. Throughout history, humans have always migrated to find resources. But now, in a world of borders, millions face immense barriers as they search for food, water, and shelter. Despite the scale of this crisis, no single international law or binding framework exists to protect those forced to move by climate change. These individuals, families, children, often have no legal status and no guarantee of refuge. Their struggle is frequently invisible, slipping through the gaps in policy and global attention. From island nations vanishing beneath rising tides to barren lands driving families into overcrowded slums, each climate refugee carries a story. Stories of loss, determination, and the fight to survive. Their voices need to be heard, and their stories compel us to act. Recently, Climate Refugees was the sole documentary film selected for inclusion in a historic lunar time capsule. This historic lunar museum was created to preserve humanity's story, told through the lens of 222 artists who lived over the past 2,000 years. Iconic names like Beethoven, Rembrandt, Van Gogh, and Elvis. The selection of Climate Refugees film underscores the critical importance of this issue, placing it on the surface of the moon as a lasting testament. In addition to this historic honor, 22 pieces of art from the filmmaker's Climate Refugees Lunar Art Stamp Collection traveled with the film on the lunar mission and is now being exhibited globally to further amplify the urgent narrative and significance of climate migration. Each piece of art is based from a person in the film that the film team met while filming. Climate Refugees is a wake-up call, casting a spotlight on the human face of climate change and the urgent demand for international action to create a legal framework. It is time to rethink the rules, to acknowledge and protect those forced to leave their homes in search of food, water, and shelter. The clock is ticking. The time to act is now. Go to climaterefugees.com to learn more.
Michael, Climate Refugees did something that was never done before, and that was putting a face to climate change. As a filmmaker, I can assume that the dream was an Oscar or an Academy Award, but did you ever thought that this film was going to have so much impact that it was going to get to policymakers in the United Nations?
No. I grew up on the Treasure Coast in Florida. And I think like anybody who heads out west to, go to Hollywood, you have these fantasies about winning accolades and hardware and trophies and stuff like that. And after I made this film, everything kind of shifted for me. We started this film in 2007, and if you remember the backdrop of climate change back then, for probably 98% of the population, climate change was about polar bears in Greenland, and it was 50 to 100 years away, if it was even going to happen. And I had this kind of just thought that just kept haunting me a little bit. Is there a human face of climate change? Is there a human face of climate change? If there is, what does it look like? Where would they be? And so we found someone who, was willing to let us travel around the world. We went to 48 countries in search of the human face of climate change. And what we found was this intersection in civilization where a really crowded world with limited resources that was over-consuming with a shifting climate was all colliding together. And the outcome of that was this forced migration. The film actually, it said there that it premiered at Sundance, but the first screening of the film was at the House, the Capitol building, in the House and Senate. And then 2 weeks later, the film screened at, I believe it was COP19 in Copenhagen, to policymakers and things like that. So no, to answer your question, I never really thought that this would have the impact that it had. And as a filmmaker, when you hear the Pope and presidents, reciting lines that are in, a film that you were involved with, it's pretty cool.
What storytelling elements do you think made this film stand out?
I think unfortunately, we were part of the eco-horror film documentaries that took place for like a decade or two. And I hope that we've gone past all of that, and the films that are being made today are much more solution-oriented. But really, when we set out to do this film, there was really no books written on it. There was no peer-reviewed. It was uncharted waters. And in fact, the United Nations had not officially named these people, these people who are displaced, till 18 months after the film came out. And they've used this film as a tool to help drive that narrative and get some policy within the text of international law. But there's still a lot more work to do.
At that moment, this was never done before. Were you ever nervous, scared, or were you always confident that the message was going to get across?
I was scared to death because we didn't even know what the ending of the film was when we started. You know, we had a really rough outline. The film completely changed when I sat down with John Kerry, and he said this is a national security issue, which I'd never heard before. And so the film really kind of went into a different direction. And about halfway through the film, maybe in like 2009, we decided to call it Climate Refugees, which we knew would, you know, would be a great title for attention. We knew the United Nations may have an issue with that title. And they've been very clear to state that, and I'm always, you know, open to state that, you know, a couple months later, 18 months later, they called, you know, environmentally induced migrants, which is perhaps the correct term. But just to share how, like, off the charts this was, or off everybody's radar, when we went to GoDaddy.com in 2009, nothing.com is really available, right? When climaterefugees.com was available, the film team was like, well, we're actually tracking something that has never really been tracked before.
As the video showed, the film was recently chosen to be part of an arts and humanities time capsule, landing on the moon for future generations and species. To learn more about the history, how do you feel that your work and your film is sitting on the moon as we speak? It's
still surreal. I mean, I still don't believe it. And in fact, you know, Caroline mentioned that we're doing a film right now, and the Vogels are involved with it. And what also went up with that film was the stamp collection, I think that you're seeing back here, and the poster to the new film, which is also up there. It's still, I mean, it's been up there. It landed February 22nd of 2024. It's like, it just, to me, it just illuminates the importance of this issue. You know, the United Nations has the number of 250 million climate migrants by 2050. Other you know, global institutions have it at 1.2 billion. I mean, think about that. Like, think about if they're 50% off. It's still a world that we've never lived in. And so I think that's really why they, you know, chose this film, is because they thought the issue was important.
In this new era of newer technologies, the evolving AI, how do you think that storytelling will evolve, and how important is creativity, art, and human connection?
I think there's a reason why art is the 3 middle letters of Earth. If you take art out of Earth, you have And so at this conference, just seeing all of the art and the energy that went into the art to tell the story is incredibly important. David and I were speaking earlier, and you know, so it's important to have the facts and the data and the stats accurately, and you could make films with all of that will play very well for academics. But if you want to make a film that's going to cast a wider net to everybody, you've got to figure out how to take the data and the facts, and put emotion behind it, and get people involved. And so, you know, I've heard multiple times, you know, Tahis and David talk about, you know, the data and the emotion, all right? And for me as a storyteller, it's very similar. It's, you know, the what, where, and when, which is what we traditionally focus on. But as a storyteller, it's the why that gets people on the edge of their seat. And so I would just share with any of you, if you have a nonprofit or if you're, you know, looking to build your own story, understand the what, where, and when, but focus on the why. Include the what, where, and when into the why, and it's amazing how people will kind of, you know, gravitate toward what you're sharing with them.
Caroline said earlier today that we're learners and teachers, but I would like to add that nowadays we're all storytellers, and that we get the chance to tell our stories through our little microphone that we keep in our back pocket. So what would you say to people trying to get that story across, from people who are not filmmakers and do not have the huge budget to do a huge movie? We have the access now.
Yeah, you know, when I started making movies, it was like 35 millimeter cameras, which are about the size of this chair, or 16 millimeter, and it was expensive. Like to do a really tiny 2-hour film or 90-minute film, it was a minimum of $100,000. Now you can take your iPhone out, which is basically broadcast quality, and you know, document anything that you want to document. I would just say to anybody out there, if you have passion for the story that you want to tell, passion is a powerful, powerful energy. I would tell you to collaborate with people that feel the same way as you. And, you know, this was the first documentary that I ever made. I make traditional movies too, and for it, you know, for it to kind of find its audience that it did and end up sitting on the lunar surface, you never know what's going to happen when you pull your iPhone out and you start documenting something to share your story. So I would just tell you to go out and shoot. Shoot, 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 shoot. And you'll learn from your mistakes. There's all sorts of wonderful YouTube, you know, instructional content out there. From a storytelling standpoint, if you haven't studied or heard about Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey, I would, even from a corporation standpoint, I would tell you that it's vital. Steven Spielberg would never make a movie until it fit Joseph Campbell's steps. And even if you're making a 3-minute or a 15-minute film, understanding how that all works and the myth behind it is a great lesson. The other thing that I would share with you is Pixar has 22 steps. And you can find it anywhere on Google and just download it, and it's these 22 steps, and when you get ready to think about writing a movie or, you know, doing a short film or something like that, fill out those 22 steps for, you know, the content that you're about to create.
Thank you, Michael, for joining us today. We'll open the floor for some questions.
Wait, I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
So your film was shown before Congress, what, 15 years ago?
Yes.
How do you think it would play now?
You know, it's interesting. I tried to make this film for everybody. And I was more interested in, when we showed it at the Capitol building, what the right would say than the left, because I thought the left would like it. And the right actually embraced it to some degree. I mean, we just live in such a unique time right now that I don't even know if it would be played.
We have one back there.
You said you hadn't done many documentary films before you were doing this.
I did traditional films.
So what made you fix on this idea and want to make this film? Because clearly it was a major effort.
Just passion. I mean, I had a question that no one could answer. And, you know, I found a bunch of people that were willing to take this trip with me. And, you know, it's really interesting. When we traveled to all of these countries in search of the human face, we also learned a lot of other things that never made the film. And that is that, one, how G20 countries have pretty much just put the elderly out to pasture. It's really just uncool. And when we went to the indigenous tribes, they embraced the wisdom of the elderly. I wish I could have gotten that in the film, but it was the film changed. I think everybody that was on this journey, it changed our lives. We didn't stay in nice hotels. We lived on the ground many times with some of the indigenous people that we spoke with, and you know, unfortunately, they still do not have a voice. And it's up to storytellers, to artists, to, data scientists to get the information to be able to share to the world, because we have a microphone, and they unfortunately don't. And many of them, I'll just give you an example we interviewed an older gentleman, he was like 76 years old, in Tuvalu, which is a small Pacific island in the middle of the Pacific. It's the smallest country in the world that gets a United Nations vote, has 10,000 people. And back then they had an understanding with New Zealand where they would take people who are under 45 years old. But if you're over 45 years old and this island sinks, you either have to figure your way off the island or... And I asked him in an interview, I said, well, will you leave the island? And it's one of the first islands that's predicted to go underwater. Many of their islands have already gone underwater. And he said, no, I will stay. And I was like, why? And he was, well, my wife is buried here. My parents are buried here. And so when this island goes underwater, and if he stays, he will go underwater as well. But for the people that went to New Zealand or wherever they went, their complete culture is gone. So 3-4 generations from now, is Tuvalu considered an Atlantis? I mean, when you really start digging into the levels of the humans that are on the front line of this, it's very challenging, and I think we should do everything we possibly can, and that's why I love seeing the energy in this room and the art in this room to move this forward.
Thank you, Michael. We're so excited too, and look forward to seeing your new project coming 2026.
Yes, it's called Chasing Truth. So if you happen to see that somewhere, please tune in.
Thank you.